Thank you very much to my co-facilitator for giving me this opportunity, and I'm very glad to be participating today in this roundtable. My name is Sefusani from the CISPM coordination team. I'm also a member of the World March of Women and in the coordination of the same. And I'm very glad to have all of you join us today for this roundtable. And I will just put the meeting into context. We saw the poster that had been sent. So the roundtable for today will be discussing the grassroots impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, which I think a lot of us are still facing, although not in as harsh terms as we'd faced it before, and the conflicts and crises on the right to food and food sovereignty. So really, as part of the African Popular Consultation on the impacts of multiple food crises, we unite to launch the Common African Declaration, which calls for the breaking of Africa's food import dependency, to implement food sovereignty, and to promote greater African involvement in coordinating the global policies, in addressing the current and future food crisis in the United Nations Committee on World Food Security, which is CFS. So this popular consultation was launched in April 2022 by the Civil Society and Indigenous Peoples Mechanism, which is CISPM of the CFS. And we are coming together today to dialogue with a roundtable of panelists from African local authorities, from national governments, from continental institutions, from international agencies and civil society, to find solutions to our food crisis that respect human rights, that respect biodiversity and the unity for all life on our planet. So we had some list of panelists, of course, which include Ibram Mayaki, which include Dr. Murede Mohari, who is a former Chief Officer of the Food and Agricultural and Forestry Sector of the Nairobi City County. We have Ibrahim Mayaki, who is the former Director of NEPAD. We have Mr. Kazuyuki Fujiwara, who's the Partnerships Officer in the FAO Regional Office. We have Ms. Rosa Semedo, who is the Executive Secretary for Food Security, Ministry of Agriculture and the Environment, Cape Verde. We also have the team from AFSA. And we have a statement on the Africa Popular Consultation, which will be read in the 5 who will be introduced shortly. But before we continue, I'd just like to ask or request all the people who have joined in the meeting, probably through the chat, you can write your name and your organization as a form for introduction, and for us to know that you're here. So as we write that in the chat, we'll also be having the communique from our 5 readers on our Africa Popular Consultation. Thank you.
Bien, donc merci beaucoup, c'est fou. Nous allons demander à Ala d'introduire, et ensuite donc, on va donner la parole aux personnes indiquées pour faire lire le communiqué que nous avons préparé suite à ces consultations aussi larges que possible, mais aussi avec des consultations en webinaire, mais aussi dans certains cas en face-to-face, en présentiel, mais aussi des questionnaires qui ont été lancés sur Internet pour permettre aux uns aux autres de pouvoir participer à cette consultation populaire. Donc, Ala, vous avez la parole.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I'm really honored to be with you all today. So I speak today as a member of the coordinating committee of the Civil Society and Indigenous Peoples Mechanism. But I'm also an African citizen, a North African food researcher, and one who lives in a country which suffers from adverse effects of a derailed food system that makes us, as Egypt, a major food importer and putting our food security at the mercy of any natural or human-induced situations and crises. With this backdrop, I would like to to introduce the popular consultations that has been taking place. The popular consultation started on July 21st with a virtual popular consultation with the Grassroots as the first session, as we call the first session, looking at the impacts of COVID-19 and also conflicts and crises on the right to food and food sovereignty in Africa. It also took place in different other regions. The CSIPM has launched the popular consultation in 5 different regions. Africa is one of them. The first session was held in the context of an initiative by the CSIPM and also accompanied by a questionnaire. This questionnaire was diffused widely, and in Africa, it had many responses. I think over 500 responses. And during the virtual consultations, we invited other social movements and small producers, organizations, other civil society organizations, indigenous peoples, and social constituencies from all over Africa. We discussed and analyzed the responses from this questionnaire. This first session of the African Popular Consultation also gave rise, through the analysis of the responses, to the declaration, which will be presented today at the roundtable. I would also like to note that last week, on September the 15th, we had an inter-regional webinar, which meant that the different regions in which the popular consultation took place came together to present their results and analysis. The outcomes from the different regions were presented, and it was a really vibrant expression of what is happening on the ground, because it provided evidence for people's suffering, but also for people's responses and solutions. So we can see this, how different this is from the other, what we call international groups. They have this approach where the atmosphere is really very abstract and detached, and also shows the international community's reaction, whether different groups like the G7, the Global Alliance, and so on, the GCRG, the Global Crisis Response Group, their responses are fragmentary. They do not really address the causes, the real causes of today's food crisis, and they don't give voice to the most affected countries and committees. And this is why what we're doing here, the popular consultations, especially in the African context, and this roundtable with the African authorities is very important. So during the session today, we will share the outcomes, we will read out the declaration, and we would look forward also to hear your assessment of what has been done and how to, the way forward and the obstacles. And finally, I would also like to note that there is a report that is a global synthesis of all these consultations. It will be presented on September the 29th. And then we want to build up a momentum towards the meeting, the plenary meeting of the Committee for Food Security 50, the CFS 50. What we really hope to obtain at the CFS 50 is an agreement that the CFS would play the most important role. It's the most inclusive and intergovernmental forum, which coordinated, where a coordinated global guidance. It should address the multiple food crises. And this proposal for the CFS to take over a major role has been supported by the members of the African group at the past CFS sessions. So really for us, this is a very important, decisive decision-making moment. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Ala, pour cette contextualisation extrêmement importante, donc qui indique que tout le débat que nous allons avoir ici va être en lien avec les systèmes alimentaires qui ont connu un certain nombre d'enjeux fondamentaux, et pour la plupart, ces enjeux existaient, mais que ces crises ont exacerbé en termes de communication, mais aussi de dynamique par un certain nombre d'États et d'institutions. Ceci étant, donc, nous allons lire le communiqué qui a été élaboré à l'issue de toutes les consultations que Ala vient de mentionner. Et ce communiqué va être lu par les différentes composantes du mécanisme de la société civile et des peuples autochtones qui composent aujourd'hui les mécanismes de la société civile. Alors, il s'agira de Catherine Lalunga, qui est du Forum mondial des pêcheurs et des travailleurs dans le secteur de la pêche. Ensuite, il y aura, mais qui est aussi membre de Katozi Women Development Trust de l'Ouganda. Ensuite, il y aura Elisabeth Mpofu, au nom de la Via Campesina, Afrique. Ensuite, il y aura, mais elle est aussi membre de ZIMZOF, qui est une organisation de producteurs au Zimbabwe. Ensuite, Samuel Ekwa, qui est de Habitat International, la coalition pour Habitat International, et qui est aussi de l'Institut Mazingira du Kenya. Ensuite, il y aura Moussa So, qui est membre qui représente l'Europa, mais qui est aussi membre d'une organisation paysanne de la Gambie, qui s'appelle Nagofag, et qui va aussi lire une partie de ce communiqué. Ensuite, il y aura Amadi Ag Mohamed Abba, qui est un pastoraliste et qui représente le WAMIP, et qui est un mouvement mondial des pastoralistes, et il est aussi membre de Admor County. Donc voilà les personnes désignées qui vont lire ce communiqué, et je crois que pour les panélistes, il s'agira aussi de l'écouter, et aussi parce qu'on va vous demander après quel est votre point de vue sur ce communiqué et comment est-ce qu'il peut servir de faire des lances aujourd'hui du débat au niveau international. Donc, je donne la parole aux lecteurs de communiqué qui vont passer un à un et pour permettre à ce qu'on puisse avancer au niveau de la table ronde. Can you start with the communiqué?
We, networks of African peasants, fisherfolk, pastoralists, agricultural workers, urban food insecure, consumers, indigenous peoples, women, youth, and civil society organizations engaged in the popular consultation launched in April 2022 by the Civil Society and Indigenous People Mechanism of the United Nations Committee on World Food Security, have come together to exchange and discuss the situation and concerns related to food that we are experiencing now in our territories, our countries, and our different regions in Africa. We are strong communities, our organizations, and all other groups of actors at the different levels of our food systems to mobilize and engage together to truly take charge of the food sovereignty of our continent. The COVID-19 pandemic and the Ukraine war have added significant new stresses to the fragile global food supply chains, which had already revealed their limits in social, environmental, and economic terms. Africa is a prime victim of existing global inequalities, a subordinated economic power on the world scene, with a limited voice in political decision-making, directly affecting the continent and its nations, and extremely uneven distribution of costs and benefits arising from exploitation of its natural resources.
L'extractivisme et l'accompagnement des ressources l'accélération des marchés mondiaux de l'armement. Ces conditions justifient amplement la frustration et le désespoir de la jeunesse dans de nombreux pays et régions terreaux de leur engagement dans des voies de survie dangereuses et illicites. Les femmes sont particulièrement touchées et leur fardeau est aggravé par la violence sexiste et les inégalités. Cette situation a en outre révélé le besoin urgent d'un changement profond vers des formes plus résilientes, durables, localisées et équitables d'approvisionnement en aliments sains et nutritifs fondés sur les principes de justice, le droit à l'alimentation et la souveraineté alimentaire qui renforcent le savoir-faire local et les ressources dans les territoires et les différents pays. Mais des puissants acteurs géopolitiques et économiques se mobilisent et promeuvent de plus en plus de récits et des initiatives qui visent à renforcer et à approfondir la portée et la domination du système alimentaire industriel mondial. Ces initiatives cherchent à contourner le seul forum mondial inclusif et participatif de gouvernance et de responsabilité dans le domaine de l'alimentation et de l'agriculture, dans lesquels les mouvements sociaux peuvent faire entendre leur voix et les gouvernements peuvent délibérer conjointement et être tenus responsables. Le Comité des Nations Unies sur la sécurité alimentaire mondiale, CSA, en faveur d'un modèle de gouvernance multipartite.
Faced with today's multiple food crisis, African governments are increasingly calling for breaking dependency on food imports. However, most of them are implementing at the same time an agenda of modernizing African agriculture by concentrating investments in specialized export-oriented commodities based on corporate seeds and technologies that destroy our continent's capacities and possibilities to effectively limit food dependency. The vertical and horizontal incoherence of sectoral policies, particularly in the areas of agriculture and trade, also constitute severe blockages to promoting local supply of food and agricultural products to sustainably cover most of food needs of our population and industry. Even where policy frameworks promoting agroecological family farming and territorial food systems have been adopted with the participation of producer organizations, they are not being implemented. Instead, for us, African small-scale producers and other social constituencies, this is the moment to decisively change the paradigm and the strategic orientations of the continent's food and agriculture policies in order to achieve Africa's food sovereignty based on the continent's rich natural resources, its people's knowledge, practices, the diversity of its cultures and social traditions, producing what we eat and eating what we produce. Coherence is needed between short-term responses to immediate needs and long-term transformative action in a context of climate change. Attaining this perspective requires the engagement of political decision makers, consumers, and our social movements.
We strongly call on African political authorities to recognize and support the value of indigenous knowledge, plants, and people. Respect the Maputo commitment of dedicating at least 10% of the national budget to the agriculture sector and prioritize investment to the benefit of small-scale producers and the development of sustainable territorial food systems to build food sovereignty. At all levels, develop coherent and inclusive cross-sectoral food strategies linking urban and rural areas with pertinent and inadequate infrastructure, making it possible for African producers to continue to supply territorial markets and cover most of the needs of urban people and local industry with healthy and nutritious food. These strategies should include regulating markets and blocking imports that compete with and undercut local products. Promote policies and measures that support control over natural resources and biodiversity, land, water, and seeds by African people themselves. Promote and support the expansion of sustainable production systems generated by communities and small-scale producers, particularly agroecology, which has been demonstrated to be an effective strategy for addressing climate change and biodiversity loss. Defend all interrelated human rights and maintain peace and security, the basis for all social life. Raise Africa's voices in international spaces like the CFS, not allowing decisions to be taken by a handful of well-resourced commodity exporting countries, particularly on issues like international trade and debt, which severely condition the policy space of African countries.
Over the past few months, we were engaged in developing a position paper on the CFS 50, And I would want to share with you a few points or bullet points that we were able to develop over the past few months. We, Network of Africa Small-Scale Producers, Consumers, Civil Society Movements, and organizations engaged to develop practice of responsible consumption as citizens based on agricultural and food products supplied by family farmers and local agro-food units, contributing to poverty reduction of small-scale producers, to economic development of our territories, and to the reduction of their food dependency. Point 2, set up our mobilization, coordination, more and strengthen our communication and collaborate with each other, united towards the same goal, food sovereignty, peace, justice for all. Point 3, strengthen dialogue with our government representatives to monitor the implementation of our commitments and contribute to the implementation of the pertinent and coherent sectoral policies with public investment directed towards priority support for agroecology and sustainable territorial food system for sovereignty. Join hands to develop a continental campaign to promote and protect family farmers, fishermen, pastoralists, urban food insecurity, and other constituencies. We call on African government and civil society engage together to defend the UNCFS and push for it to act as an inclusive multilateral space for developing coherent, globally coordinated policy guidance addressing present and future food crises, with priorities voiced for most affected countries and constituencies.
Merci beaucoup à tous ceux qui viennent de lire ces communiqués. Nous avons pris soin de mettre le communiqué dans la boîte de dialogue, donc que vous pouvez télécharger dans cette boîte de dialogue. Donc le secrétariat du CSIPM a déjà mis la déclaration dans la boîte de dialogue que chacun pourra télécharger pour ceux qui ne l'ont pas déjà reçu. Ceci étant, donc, nous allons commencer la table ronde. Nous nous excusons du fait qu'il y a Maya qui n'a pas pu... Oui.
I'm sorry to cut you there, but I just wanted, just before we proceed to the round table, just to share a little bit of statistics that we have prepared on this declaration and the sign-ons that we had so far. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, good idea. Go ahead, please, Matthias.
Just to give the people an idea of how far-reaching we are at this stage. Give me just a second here.
On vous entend bien, on vous entend très bien.
Great. So up to now, okay, this is information pulled this morning. Of course, the number has increased by now. But at that point this morning, we had signatures from over 44 African countries, from 44 signatories from 24 different African countries and 4 countries in the international community. And the organizations that were with us are representing over 4,610,500 people. So almost 5 million people, according to our signatures, are supporting this declaration. Thank you very much. That's all I wanted to share with you. And back to you, Mamadou. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. This means that since we continue to register and then to sign this declaration, so it's open. So just take time to download it, and then for those who receive it already, just to take time to sign it. Thanks a lot, Matthias. So we'll start. On va commencer donc la table ronde. Cette table ronde avec certaines personnalités qui ont déjà été cités par Sefou, et du fait que Mayaki n'a pas pu nous rejoindre pour le moment, parce qu'il était censé être le premier intervenant de cette table ronde-là, qui est un espace dédié à des acteurs extrêmement importants pour nous en tant que mécanisme de la société civile et des peuples autochtones, de les entendre par rapport à cette déclaration, de les entendre par rapport à des espaces comme le Comité de sécurité alimentaire, CFS en anglais, de les entendre par rapport à des mesures qui sont prises au niveau des États, au niveau des institutions africaines, mais aussi au niveau de certaines structures qu'ils représentent, les mesures qui sont prises actuellement pour que l'Afrique puisse non seulement faire entendre sa voix, mais aussi aider à ce qu'on puisse retrouver cette voix africaine dans les décisions qui sont prises au niveau international sur le système alimentaire. Donc, je vais donner la parole à ma co-modératrice Seifou, qui va commencer la première série de questions aux panélistes, et en commençant par Semedo. Donc, Madame Semedo, donc, qui va commencer cette série, et ensuite on continuera avec les autres panélistes. You have the floor, Seifou.
Much for it, Mamadou. Okay, we've just sent to the declaration, the African Declaration.
I think there's a problem in connection with Sefu. Mamadou, we just lost her.
Is the Executive Secretary for Food Security at the Ministry of Agriculture and Environment. Mr. Meadow, welcome to this session, Africa Popular Consultation Table, and thank you for being one of our panelists and experts. And I think before we continue, I'd like to ask your opinion on the communique that has just been read out. What did you think about it? Are there any pointers you'd like to highlight before we continue? We'll have the chat of Hala says they cannot hear the interpreting. So we can work on the French interpretation of the same. As I was saying, I wanted to invite Ms. Rosa Semedo, who is the Executive Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture and Environment in Cape Verde. And from the communique and declaration that was just read from ACA members from the ACA Popular, I'd like to ask for a comment or a reaction from Ms. Semedo before we proceed to the questions. Welcome, Ms. Semedo.
Alô, bom dia.
Bom dia, podemos escutar.
Já começou a mesa redonda, né? Posso apresentar.
Yes, please.
Eu vou ter
the declaration from the Africa Popular Consultation that happened and the community. What do you think about it, and do you have any pointers in regard to this declaration that has been made? I can highlight a few of the points. A few of the points that have been read, especially from the fisher folk, from the women folk, the African peasants, from the agricultural workers, urban food insecure consumers, indigenous people.
Nous avons quelques soucis. On n'entend pas la voix de Sefou. So Sefou, we cannot hear you very well. Madame Semedo, est-ce que vous nous entendez bien?
Eu não consegui ouvir bem, eu gostaria, se já entramos nas questões ou ir diretamente para a minha intervenção.
Elle a fait une présentation.
Eu tenho uma pequena apresentação.
Est-ce qu'elle a fait une présentation? Plutôt que, comme c'est une table ronde, il n'y a pas beaucoup de temps pour la présentation. On voulait aller par système de questions-réponses. Est-ce qu'elle a une présentation et combien de temps ça va durer? Si ça peut être rapide.
Alors,
I believe Ms. Semedo is having some
sim.
trouble with the interpretation. I'm sorry, Mamadou.
Okay.
If I could get it correctly,
Bom,
she did not hear the question from.
OK, donc elle pourra faire la présentation, mais il faut qu'elle aille un peu plus vite pour qu'on puisse regarder. Et puis, bon, après, on va poser une ou deux questions après sa présentation. Donc,
okay. Bom, eu tenho uma breve apresentação, já partilhei a tela. Agradeço primeiramente em nome do governo de Cabo Verde, felicitar pela essa iniciativa. Nós, assim, em termos de Cabo Verde, ele está inserido num pequeno estado, como um pequeno estado insular. Então, os pequenos estados insulares são os países que são os que são mais afetados pelas crises. São os que são mais afetados pelas crises, pelas múltiplas crises. Nós sofremos pela crise da Covid-19, pelas mudanças climáticas e pela consequência da guerra entre a Rússia e a Ucrânia. Isso tem afetado diretamente a questão tanto do acesso e a disponibilidade de alimentos, sobretudo nos países onde já são muito vulneráveis às mudanças climáticas. Somos países que são altamente dependentes de importações de alimentos para cobrir as nossas necessidades básicas. E os sistemas alimentares nos pequenos estados insulares já são frágeis e insustentáveis. E, para além disso, somos afetados pela tripla carga da desnutrição, tanto a questão da desnutrição elevada, a questão das deficiências nutricionais e também pelo excesso de peso e obesidade. E os CIDs são os países que têm uma baixa produção de alimentos, disponibilidade de alimentos, sobretudo provenientes da produção local. Cabo Verde, no contexto específico, desde 2017, nós estamos a vivenciar secas severas. Essas secas têm uma consequência drástica na produção agroalimentar e no rendimento das famílias, sobretudo as famílias que vivem no meio rural. E a pandemia veio complicar muito essa situação. Trouxe desemprego, porque é um país que vive no turismo, aumento dos preços de alimentos, sobretudo alimentos de primeira necessidade. Isso veio afetar ainda mais a questão da insegurança alimentar, que os últimos dados mostram que mais de um terço da população sofre de insegurança alimentar. E a guerra na Ucrânia agravou ainda mais a situação em todo o mundo. E em caso de Cabo Verde, com o aumento da inflação e preços dos alimentos, a cadeia logística foi muito afetada. Nós levamos, muitas vezes, em certos produtos mais de 6 meses para chegar, e aumento da energia e fertilizantes, e já os fenômenos meteorológicos extremos, sobretudo a seca, somos muito afetados pela seca, e o preço, em abril, o preço teve um aumento mais elevado. Nós, como eu disse, mais de 80% dos alimentos que consumimos vêm da importação. Quando nós falamos de produtos alimentares de primeira necessidade, isso ascende aos 90%. E em 2020, nós fazemos um estudo para avaliar a questão da insegurança e o impacto da Covid na insegurança alimentar. mostrou-se que 1/3 das famílias não tinham acesso econômicos a alimentos. Isso, 10% estava em situação de privação alimentar grave. Isso o que quer dizer? Isso quer dizer que o direito humano à alimentação foi comprometida. As famílias tinham que mudar o seu consumo, ou tinham um consumo insuficiente, e cerca de 1/3 dessas famílias adaptaram alguma estratégia de estresse. Quem eram essas que foram mais afetadas? Famílias, as mulheres, que eram representantes do agregado familiar, com as famílias mais numerosas e as que tinham crianças menores de 5 anos. Isso, em Cabo Verde, é histórico, as ilhas de vocação agrícola serem mais afetadas, mas com a pandemia vemos algumas ilhas de vocação turística muito afetadas. E eu trouxe aqui uma variação de preços em certos produtos. Há variações, o aumento chegou a 84%. Analisando a situação conjuntural, Cabo Verde, as chuvas, nós tivemos redução na produção agroalimentar com início cada vez mais tardio e precoce das chuvas e o aumento generalizado de preços de alimentos. Isso teve impacto tanto na situação corrente, de acordo com os dados do quadro harmonizado, como na situação projetada, que era para junho e agosto. Eu digo aqui que, normalmente, 3% da população que encontrava em situação de crise alimentar, com essa situação, nós atingimos quase 10% da população em situação de crise alimentar, segundo o quadro harmonizado. O governo adotou algumas medidas, desde 2017, 4 medidas foram implementadas de mitigação e resiliência à seca. Com a Covid também foi implementada medidas relativamente para a estabilização de preços de alimentos, porque nós somos um país da importação, e no âmbito do impacto da escalada de preços decorrente da guerra da Ucrânia, também várias medidas foram implementadas, sobretudo que vai respeito à estabilização de preços e do sistema agroalimentar, o aumento do rendimento das famílias através de trabalho público e também assistência alimentar. Essas medidas, quais são os impactos? É forma a evitar a ruptura do estoque, sobretudo dos cereais. Também a questão da pecuária, que é uma fonte de rendimento muito importante, sobretudo para as famílias rurais. Foi implementadas medidas no sentido de estabilizar essa atividade. E também um programa que é muito importante aqui é a questão do reforço da alimentação escolar. Nós temos, como CIDs, nós temos vários desafios, sobretudo no que tange ao aumento da produção e da produtividade, estabelecimento de medidas para os mercados regionais, incluindo medidas sanitárias e fitossanitárias, e fortalecimento das capacidades de resiliência para enfrentar os desafios das mudanças climáticas. Outro grande desafio é combater o triplo fardo da malnutrição, a pobreza extrema, o baixo nível da escolaridade, sobretudo dos produtores agrícolas e pescadores. As soluções nós achamos que passam, sobretudo, por uma agricultura inteligente, sensível ao clima, com sementes resistentes ao clima, a utilização de inimigos biológicos para o combate às pragas, a questão da pesca sustentável para o nosso país, que estamos banhados pelo mar, é muito importante, e o aumento da disponibilidade da água, no caso de país que sofre muito com a seca, e o uso de recursos eficientes, sobretudo hídricos. Alargamento da proteção social não contributiva através de promoção de emprego digno para as mulheres, conforme vimos, elas são mais afetadas pela questão da crise, promover dietas alimentares saudáveis e sustentáveis, também as políticas comerciais sensíveis à alimentação e fortalecimento das capacidades de resiliência. Muito obrigada.
Thanks a lot for this presentation. And then if you may allow, we just have some few questions that we like you, since we are dealing with a roundtable, to check if we can just discuss this. Donc la première question que je voulais poser à Madame Semedo, en écoutant cette déclaration du mécanisme de la société civile, quelles sont ses opinions pour les points qui sont abordés dans cette déclaration? Qu'est-ce qu'elle peut, à chaud comme ça, qu'est-ce qu'elle peut donner comme impression après avoir écouté un tel communiqué, une telle déclaration qui est faite par la société civile dans un espace comme le CFS?
Alô, sim, nós achamos como que os países africanos precisam de traçar políticas de agricultura por forma a aumentar a disponibilidade dos alimentos, produção e sensibilização para o consumo de alimentos locais, mas assim, políticas estratégicas importantes, sobretudo para a classe mais vulnerável. Entendemos que o CFS tem um papel muito importante, porque o CFS consegue dar orientações gerais sobre as políticas e estratégias de segurança alimentar e, para além disso, ela consegue reunir vários intervenientes para a discussão das principais políticas e desafios para os sistemas alimentares, sobretudo para os países que são mais afetados. No caso dos pequenos estados insulares em desenvolvimento, os estados africanos especificamente, nós entendemos que precisam de ações mais específicas, tendo em conta as suas particularidades que já abordamos, pois sabemos que nós somos os que mais sofrem em casos de crise. E esse modelo de governança, modelo multissetorial, nós entendemos que não constitui uma ameaça. No entanto, o maior desafio é ter uma maior articulação e uma coordenação em prol de um sistema alimentar justo e sustentável.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, quand on regarde un peu l'environnement actuel pour débattre des systèmes alimentaires, quelle est l'importance, selon vous, Madame Semedo, quelle est l'importance des espaces de gouvernance et de responsabilités inclusives et participatives tels que le CSA, donc le CFS en anglais, pour l'alimentation et la nutrition dans les petites nations insulaires comme africaines, par exemple? Est-ce qu'il y a un modèle de gouvernance multi-acteurs? Est-ce que ces modèles de gouvernance multi-acteurs constituent une menace pour ce que vous êtes en train de faire en tant que pays, en tant que Cap-Vert? Qu'est-ce qu'elle pense de l'espace du CSA en tant qu'espace ouvert, participatif, et qui permet justement à tous les acteurs, à toutes les constituantes, de pouvoir débattre des questions liées au système alimentaire de façon démocratique? Qu'est-ce qu'elle en pense?
Bom, nós entendemos que esse espaço, o CFS, é um espaço muito importante. Ele consegue ouvir todas as partes interessadas, mas entendemos que a questão dos CIDs, dos pequenos estados insulares, precisam ser melhor discutidas, porque nós sofremos as consequências que os grandes estados implementam, as políticas que os grandes estados implementam. Quando nós falamos isso, sobretudo na questão das mudanças climáticas, esses pequenos estados insulares precisam ter maior representatividade nos Conselhos Mundiais de Segurança Alimentar. que quem é mais afetado pelas crises são os pequenos estados insulares.
Un autre point, en écoutant, disons, parce que par rapport à ce que vous avez présenté, tous les enjeux qui sont derrière, est-ce que quand on regarde aussi le modèle de gouvernance multi-acteurs, est-ce que ceci constitue une menace pour ce que vous venez de dire en tant que pays comme le Cap-Vert, avec un certain nombre d'enjeux importants qui sont autour de ce débat? Est-ce que vous pensez que la gouvernance, le modèle de gouvernance multi-acteurs qui est prôné peut constituer une menace pour des pays comme le Cap-Vert? Je rappelle aux participants qu'on ne posera pas de questions à ce niveau-là. Vous avez vu la structure par le programme. On va revenir à un dialogue après toutes les présentations. Donc, on va ouvrir les débats après toutes les présentations qui sont faites. Donc, il ne s'agit pas aujourd'hui de lever la main à ce stade, mais d'écouter les panélistes jusqu'à la fin. Est-ce que Mme Semedo a écouté la question?
Consegui, sim. Eu não sei se se conseguiram me ouvir. Já respondi à questão sobre o modelo de governança que é levado a cabo no CFS. Nós temos modelo de governança.
Ok, donc un dernier point, si c'est déjà répondu. Quels sont les conseils qu'elle a en écoutant cette déclaration, en présentant la situation spécifique aujourd'hui du Cap-Vert? Quels sont les conseils qu'elle peut donner pour justement que la contribution qui est en train d'être faite par la société civile puisse avoir une voix beaucoup plus grande au niveau d'un espace comme le CSA? Si elle a des recommandations particulières au niveau du mécanisme de la société civile, en tant qu'État.
Nós, como Estado e Cabo Verde, nós entendemos que essa declaração elaborada pelo Grupo Africano é muito importante, tendo em conta o poder da África, os recursos naturais que a África como continente possui. Esses recursos, a África precisa de aumentar a produção, maior investimento, sobretudo na agricultura, mas uma agricultura voltada para o consumo, também para o consumo local, não apenas para a exportação, como muitos casos acontecem, mas sobretudo para o consumo interno. E também uma maior troca de sinergia entre os diferentes países africanos, dando sempre maior prioridade para os pequenos produtores, as organizações dos pequenos produtores. Achamos que esse grupo da sociedade civil, essa declaração é muito importante para as nações africanas e também que essas produções também... Alô?
Merci beaucoup, Madame Semedo, pour faire cette contribution extrêmement importante pour nous. Merci surtout pour votre présence dans ce panel. Nous allons donc, je vais remettre la parole à Sefou et Mouhari va être la seconde personne à intervenir au cours de cette table ronde. Donc, je rappelle tous les participants que nous allons avoir un moment de dialogue avec tout le monde. Et après la présentation, nous avons Mayaki qui risque de ne pas se joindre à nous. Il doit être en voyage actuellement. Donc, il n'a pas pu rejoindre un espace pour pouvoir, une place pour pouvoir se connecter apparemment. Donc, on va écouter les trois personnes qui sont avec nous et ensuite, on aura un moment de questions-réponses. Mais vous pouvez jusqu'à présent mettre vos questions dans la boîte de dialogue qui va nous permettre de les récupérer après et de les poser aux intervenants. Donc, je donne la parole à Sefou et qui va aller échanger avec Mouhari à ce stade de notre table ronde. Sefou, you have the floor. I hope that your microphone will be working.
Yes.
Sefu?
I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you. I don't know if you can hear me properly.
I can, please.
Maybe you can just confirm.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much.
In my presentation,
Yes.
I will just talk about the policy coherence
Yes.
between national and the local governments.
Yes.
The impact of the incoherence of the policies. What we find out is that incoherence in the policy fail to articulate real needs of the local governments and its populations. Since local government situations of food needs, utilization of food, capabilities of local governments to respond to food security and food systems needs. We find that policies that are made at national level may not take into account diverse needs, vulnerabilities of price chains, production systems, and the nutritional deficits in various local governments. Mostly is policies that are not inclusive and are productive. They do not address equity and pose a problem to coordinate. Furthermore, lack a consideration of existing networks. Perhaps they only consider issues that have been borrowed from different countries or different sources and purport that the same policies will address needs of the local situation. As such policies may not be, even if they are implemented, they will play the role of the local indigenous knowledge. They will play the role of coping mechanisms of local people. And many times they may lack ownership. We have case in point where foods supplies that are provided to vulnerable communities may not be the preferences for such people. So the implementation of such policies may not really address the requirements of the people. When we have incoherent policies, this may lead also to misdirection on prudent use of scarce resources that may need to be properly directed and actually address the needs, the food needs of the people. Our input into this is that even in national and local governments, there may not be adequate capacity to handle policy processes that are inclusive, that are responsive, that are also productive, and that they may actually address the need of such policies. We think it is also the role of CFS to technically assist national and local governments in order to develop more inclusive, more responsive, and actually better policies in their own countries and also in their regions. And this is not only particularly because of COVID impact, it also includes the other impacts that are brought in by recurrent droughts, that is climate change related issues. It may also include poverty issues, because there are also resource conflicts associated with scarce resources, especially for fisher folk, for pastoralists, for small-scale farmers, including even the stakeholders who are in the business of supporting food systems in local and county and national governments. We also know that implementation of certain food system policies may lead to violence, especially where people feel certain regions feel that their needs are not properly taken care of. And they may also lead to political unrest and other issues, including crime. We have case in point where certain communities, when they are under food distress, they may carry out thefts or what even we call banditry in order to supply food needs to their communities. In summary, Africa needs to develop wider responsive policies that should also look at lessons learned from other continents, and they may also take into consideration policies that have not also worked, even when they have been implemented in other regions. I think that could be my presentation, but when it comes to my area, which includes food systems in urban areas, and in response to COVID crisis, we find that the biggest impact was on both nutrition and health, since people could not afford to buy food because their purchasing power was eroded. And in such a case, people tended to use just food that could be that could only provide survival, and the nutrition, especially of the children, were adversely affected. The malnutrition rate in Nairobi was discovered to be about 26%, and it was as low as in some pastoral areas where drought had been recurrent for long. There is a tendency to think that people in the cities and in other urban areas are food secure. This is also not true, because in the COVID season, recession and low incomes were reported in all those areas. And in so doing, even when we were responding to food needs of the people, water and food preparation requirements, such as fuel and energy to prepare food, was also not adequate, and we had a poor utilization of available food, because people do not also know how to prepare meals that are available during stress period. So awareness is important in terms of food preference, food preparation, fuel, and other requirements for preparing food, including water and hygienic methods of preparing such food. In summary, our policies should be inclusive, taking into consideration that currently, due to Ukraine war, drought situation, and COVID and other stresses, energy and water, including even equipment that can process certain foods within local areas, should be considered. I think I beg just to stop there, because I'll be able to participate in the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohari, for that. At least we've been able to hear what you had to say. And maybe I can just ask one question, and then we can take the rest of the questions during the debate. And the question I'd like to ask you, is there a place for local food production in large urban areas? And what can be done at municipal or territorial level to transform food systems and to build better links between the rural and the urban areas? I'll take that again. Is there a place for local food production in large urban centers, for example, like Nairobi that you mentioned? And what can be done at municipal or territorial level to transform food systems and build better links between the rural and the urban areas?
Yeah, land may not be in plenty, but there is adequate land in the public spaces. What is required is to develop procedures and processes that will access that land to people who are vulnerable and who are willing and who can also be trained to do food production in such public spaces. In Nairobi particularly, we have a program where we have identifying all the available spaces, public spaces, for such a purpose. The other issue is land issues are emotive in urban centers, and many people may fear that if there is no legal and policy framework to provide such spaces, there could be violence. So the other thing, in large municipalities, we need a regulatory framework which does not only support food production, but also regulates it so that it does not pollute or bring about public health nuisance, or even damage the environment. Such a framework is very necessary. In our experience, most of the municipalities had of the idea that agriculture was dirty and as a nuisance, and it should not have been allowed in large municipalities. Currently, we have proved that we have technologies that are convenient, that are sound for environmental protection, that can be used within small spaces, that can be afforded by local people. However, more research needs to be conducted to improve or even modify existing technologies so that they can produce much more and they can actually support poor people in the informal settlements. In terms of linkages between the urban and the rural, it is true that there is a lot of production in the rural, but food supply chains that may make food available in certain urban areas may be lacking. In such a case, food system strategies need to be developed that are suitable for those cross-cutting issues. We have a point in Kenya where Nairobi City and its environment has already developed a food system strategy to ensure that all the people can access food of the right quality at all times, and that there is a government planning and intervention, including stakeholders who participate in implementing the food strategy. However, it is only in the initial stages, but we believe it can actually yield the required results, and that policy direction will have the inputs of all the required people, and it is our hope that it will work in future and improve our food systems in the local area and also in the urban areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response. That is Dr. Murray Mohari, who is former
we still have some problem with Sefu. Just before you finish, Dr. Mohari, I would like to ask you a last question. Okay, she's coming back.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, there is a problem with your mic. So I will just ask Dr. Mohari, do you have some recommendation for the civil society mechanism just to push this declaration so that it can be relevant for different stakeholders, for different actors that you have, particularly for municipalities?
Municipalities should be, okay.
Yeah, any recommendation so that this declaration can be really very relevant for different range of stakeholders actually, but particularly if you can recommend the way that it will reach municipalities and then any space and any kind of recommendation you have so far for that and for other stakeholders.
Municipalities should be sensitized that food needs and food systems are very also relevant for their people, and especially for the poor and informal settlements. In such a case, local people, including their community-based organizations, civil society, and others, can be engaged to come up with the food systems that could supply food to the municipalities. In such a policy, they will look at the production needs, supply chain systems. They will look at other stakeholders and what input the coordination could yield. That would make it owned by other people, owned by even international and other partners, and they can also join other cities that are doing the similar things, so that they can also learn and also promote the same activities, even at the level of CFS. And I think that one would be a good declaration that all municipalities and other cities could also develop their own food systems. Policies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohari Muredi, who is the former Chief Officer of the Food, Agriculture and Forestry sector of Nairobi City County. And in case there are any other questions to go towards him, we can write them up in the chat. Of course, he can be able to see and respond and also come up during the sector that we will have much later for an open debate. So thank you so much for that. And now I'll shift it back to Mama Doe to invite our next speaker.
Thank you very much, Sefu. So the next speaker is working at the partnership office in FAO regional office, and then is Mr. Kazuyuki Fujiwara, who is really working at this regional office, just developing partnership in the region. So we'll just ask for the first question to Kaz. So it's called Kaz. Just to ask the question, what is your take in listening to this declaration that was done by CSI PM? What are your opinion on that first, and then we'll come back on the question related to your institution.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mamadou. And I'd like to thank organizer for this invitation to a very important roundtable of CSIPM on behalf of Mr. Abebe Haile Gabriel, FAO Assistant Director General, Regional Representative for Africa. And I stand on an existing protocol. Perhaps before answering your question, just sort of a disclaimer. My intention is to share some information relevant to your declaration, and which I believe is important. Yet I refrain from commenting on your declaration, as I understand that your declaration has been developed through regional consultation by CSIPM, Civil Society Indigenous Peoples Mechanism, and to be submitted to the UN Committee on World Food Security, CFS. And as you know, FAO is one of the joint hosts of CFS, together with IFAD and WFP, as an intergovernmental organization. So rather, I wish to share some few information on state of food security and nutrition in Africa, and public expenditure in food and agriculture in Africa, but also some of the work such as agroecology as a nature-based solution. I hope it'll be okay for you.
Okay, if you look at
So yeah, allow me to share with you some information. So yes, apparently in terms of state of food security and nutrition, as also widely known, Africa, the hunger is on rise, multiple shocks, and protracted crises have exacerbated vulnerability of Africa, including family farmers, small-scale food producers over the past years. So allow me to close my video to secure my bandwidth, as we have a bit of a connectivity problem today. And those, the multiple shocks include climate extremes, conflict, COVID-19 pandemic, economic shocks, and now a war in Ukraine. 1 in 5 people facing hunger in 2021 in Africa. Africa bearing the heaviest burden in terms of prevalence of hunger compared to other regions across the world. The latest report on state of food security and nutrition in the world shows that in Africa, about 278 million people face hunger in 2021. And this is an increase of 46 million people compared to the level in 2021 before the COVID pandemic. The COVID does impact significantly. And now the war in Ukraine exposed Africa's vulnerability with a dependency on food imports as well as fertilizer from Russian Federation and Ukraine and others. And coupled with the food fertilizer export restrictions, African countries have been severely impacted. As Madame Semedo from Cape Verde shared with us those figures, 84% food increase in the country, which is quite shocking. Food prices have skyrocketed. FAO Food Price Index reached historic peak levels in March 2020. And then it showed some downward trends after it remained higher. But healthier diets have become unaffordable for majority of population in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa. And fertilizer have become less affordable in a timely manner for, in particular, small-scale producers, family farmers. And Africa is not on track in terms of achieving end hunger by 2025 or by 2030. The third CAADP Pioneer report, launched by African Union with their support by FAO, shows that in achieving 7 Malabo commitments in Africa as a whole, not on track, with slight improvements over the years. But nonetheless, there's only one country who showed on track, which is Rwanda, but 19 countries progressing well, and others, 31, not on track. We need to find ways to get back on track. In relation to Maputo commitment, of 10% national budget allocation to agriculture sector. Where are we now? Again, this cut-up biennial report said some progress in over 20 countries, but still we are not yet there. And another interesting analysis, which I would like to share with you from FAO, is that the government spending on food and agriculture in 2004 to 2018 in 13 sub-Saharan African countries showed interesting results and recommended spending better and more when applicable, when possible. And now, over 20% unspent on average. And in particular, when it comes to development financing by international financial institutions, unspent around 40%. And in some countries, I mean, in a few countries, the largest proportion of public expenditure in agriculture sector remains to subsidies for agriculture inputs. And in other countries,
sorry, guys, because we'll be short on time. If you can just speed up to give some of these figures very quickly so that we can finish and then interact, because people are waiting for interaction also. Just very flash information, and then we go for the interaction session. Sorry to interrupt. Huh? Go ahead.
Sure. No, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So indeed, there are some the diversion from more to social protection, cash transfer, school feeding program, etc., infrastructure, forest land management, sustainable forest land, water management, environment protection, biodiversity, etc. But still perhaps more to be done in terms of efficient use, not only spending more, but spending wisely. That's also a very important point. And many of the countries has challenges in terms of physical space with our high public debt ratio as well. But there are a number of good responses from international financial institutions as well to support the countries to address these issues as well. Yeah, then allow me to stop there, Mr. Mamadou, and then I'm willing to have a dialogue and wait for your kind question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Sefu. We can hear you.
Thank you so much for that intervention, which was very powerful. And maybe just we have one question for you before we transit to the rest of the participants, and it is the transition of African food systems towards food sovereignty is inclusive and intersectional. So among many other things, this means that organized producers, and specifically the small-scale ones and consumers, must be involved in policy making, monitoring, and interpretation. How can the Food and Agriculture Organization and other United Nations bodies contribute towards this?
Thank you very much, Sevu, for your question. I do believe that FAO and other UN agencies can contribute by several ways, but in particular, I'd like to highlight 4 key functions. The first one, convener of multi-stakeholder, multi-sectoral dialogue at all levels, global, regional, national, and even sub-national level, for example, at the county level, as Mr. Hali mentioned. And secondly, technical assistance or analysis and support, generating evidence and data for evidence-based, science-based decision-making. And thirdly, mobilization and facilitation of technical financial resources, and in particular in a good hands of small-scale producers and family farmers. And last but not least, more of the programmatic work on various thematic areas, important ones: agroecology, UN Decade for Family Farming, VGGT, voluntary guidelines on responsible governance and plant tenure, fisheries, forestry, etc. And so in terms of first conveners functions, as already mentioned, UNCFS is an important fora as an inclusive intergovernmental committee, which FAO jointly hosts with other law-based agency. UN Food System Summit was there, as all of you participated at the national dialogue, regional dialogue, and a number of independent dialogue. And now national pathways delivered by at the national level. FAO stands to support, together with other UN agencies, as hosting this hub to provide the necessary support. FAO itself also organizing regional conference for policymakers, and we also dedicated the important forum for civil society and producers organization with a view to bringing their voices, from smallholder farmers, family farmers, producers, pastoralists, forest traders, fisher folks, indigenous people, consumers, to policymakers. And we are working together with a number of you for that. And of course, it's got to be multi-sectoral. For example, FAO supported African Union Commission to establish COVID-19 task force when the pandemic started, to facilitate dialogue. Not only ministers of agriculture, but ministers of trade industry and ministers of finance to safeguard and keep agri-food system open, and while mobilizing, providing necessary supports to most vulnerable. But also, we also co-organize with you, number of you, with various actors, civil society, producers, organization, to bridging those voices as well. And we strive to develop partnerships with producers organization, consumers, for example, Pan-African Farmers Organizations and Consumers Internationals, to address issues, bringing their voices, joint advocacy to policymakers, but also capacity development. I could go on and on for this, but I guess I should stop there to have more space for the dialogue. So allow me to stop there. Thank you. Over back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kazuyuki Fujiwara, for joining, for your intervention, and even for tackling that question. And we now move to the next session of this roundtable, which is a plenary and interactive session. So we'd like to invite the participants in this session. We've had from the roundtable, we've had from Ms. Semedo, we had from Mr. Muredi, we've had from Mr. Fujiwara. And now for any questions or any comments, even on the communique that was given, the declaration on the Africa popular consultation that was read earlier, this is the opportunity to comment, to ask any questions, and you can raise your hand in the chat and get the opportunity. And for those who are unable to raise their hands in the chat, you can also type your questions there. We can be able to read them out. If you want to direct them to specific people, that would be okay. If you have any comment on what has been said, what you think can be added in the communique to make it more relevant, this is the opportunity.
Thanks, Seifu. I just want to remind that this is an interactive session. So this means that you don't have to ask questions only to the panelists. You can just ask questions globally on the declaration, and then online with what has been proposed there. So anybody in the group can react to this question that will be posed. You can also contribute, but be short because we don't have enough time, and then we have to stop in 26 minutes, and then we really need to interact with as many people as possible. So thanks. You can raise your hands or take the floor if possible, then we can talk. There are some questions that were already in the chat box. There was one from, il y avait une question, disons, qui venait de Moussaka, et qui demandait s'il y avait des dispositions particulières au niveau de l'Union africaine pour prendre en charge les questions de souveraineté alimentaire avec la participation de l'ensemble des producteurs. Donc, est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui peut réagir à cette question? J'ai juste formulé dans l'esprit, parce que je n'ai pas le truc devant moi, mais cette question avait déjà été posée par Moussaka. Sinon, Moussa, vous pouvez ouvrir votre micro et puis poser la question. Est-ce que Moussaka est avec nous? Bon, il a dû avoir les problèmes de connexion.
Mamadou, may I?
Okay, go ahead.
Maybe to get this ball rolling, Mamadou, I'll tackle this first one and throw it to our panelists as well. I want to. The question is whether there's a place in the African Union for building food sovereignty with the support of farmers and their plans. Maybe I would love to hear from our dear guests here, our panelists on this. But as far as I understand, the closest that we have gotten in the African Union system to tackle the issue of food sovereignty directly is an initiative that's being taken by AFSA, the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, together with the Africa Union to develop a study on the state of the legislation of food systems in African countries and towards developing a proposal of an African food policy, a comprehensive policy for Africa. Unfortunately, that discussion, after a long process by AFSA to carry studies in more than 30 countries and developing policy briefs for the AU Commission, the process has not gone forward yet. And I would love to, having shared this information, ask Maria Rosa if she has heard about this process and if she would like to comment on this as well. And for the others, Mr. Peter and Kaz as well. Thank you.
Any reaction?
There is a mic. There is a mic that is on. Can you ask them to mute, please?
Thank you, Musa. So, Kaz want to react to that point. Kaz, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mamadou. Yeah, I think it depends how you're looking at it, but I'd like to share with you, I mean, most of you should know, but the political will at the highest level. If you recall, those the African Summit held in Abuja, Nigeria, back in 2006 of Abuja Declaration on Food Security and Abuja Declaration on Fertilizer for Green Revolution. That really states those the necessary urgent measures to accelerate development and strategic commodities such as rice, maize, legume, at a continental level, and also sub-regional for to really secure the food security in the continent. And along with that, the fertilizer in light of this current situation of Ukraine war as we suffer. So those are the political will are there. And it's a matter, I guess, how we translate, taking advantage of this political highest level commitment or the declaration into practice. Let me stop there.
Thank you. Any other contribution? Musa? Musa Sow?
Thank you very much. I don't know if I'm audible over there. Am I definitely audible over there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear very well.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe just to either respond or comment on regarding the question that is asked for the northern part of Africa. Yes, there are commitments, particularly if you refer back to the Mobutu Declaration of the 10% of the public investment into agriculture, which they tell you that there are commitments at the AU to promote and also ensure there is food security. And again, if you also look at the NIFE, for example, the National Investment Plan for different countries will also tell you that these are CADEC promoted policies, considering that there is possibility of having to have food security in Africa, and that's the whole of Africa. So I think that there are areas and policies that are geared towards promote food sovereignty in Africa, which looks at the Mobutu Declaration of 10% of public expenditure, and also looking at the NIFES and other policy documents that looks at the biodiversity. And so I think there are many of them that one can quote to say that they have been part of the strikes at the AU to ensure that there is food security in the whole of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Moussa, very much. Je vais demander donc à M. Kofi Akakpo, qui vient juste de mettre quelque chose dans la chat box, donc de l'exprimer, s'il peut ouvrir son micro. M. Kofi. Vous n'êtes pas là? Alors, je vais lire ce qu'il a dit. Hein. À mon avis, nous n'avons pas encore un mécanisme clair, durable et influençant, mais à partir de ces consultations populaires, on peut proposer un outil ou mécanisme ou politique qui sera inclusif et participatif avec l'aide de toutes les parties prenantes pour la souveraineté alimentaire et nutritionnelle de notre Afrique. Donc, juste, est-ce qu'il y a une réaction par rapport à ça, par rapport au mécanisme? Est-ce qu'il y a des propositions, des contributions? Partant de cette déclaration qu'on vient de lire. Le groupe est timide. Hein? D'autres contributions? Est-ce que cela veut dire que tout est déjà, tout a été dit? That everything has been said? Matheus?
Yes, just a note for the interpreters. There's 2 of you in the English channel. Mamadou, I would like to, yeah, Mr. Coffee?
Yes. Yes,
please go ahead.
it is Mrs.
My apologies.
It's a woman. Maybe it's une femme qui parle.
Ok, allez-y. Hein.
Bonjour, distingués invités panélistes.
Mes excuses, j'ai pas vu le reste du nom. J'ai vu juste Kofi Akakpo, donc je m'excuse. Allez-y.
Non, merci. Bonjour, différentes personnalités ici présentes. Je voulais juste réagir comme le réseau flottait. C'est pourquoi j'ai écrit dans le chat sur la question sur le mécanisme clair et puis que quelqu'un a écrit dans le groupe. Moi, je pense que jusqu'à ce jour, nous n'avons pas encore un mécanisme bien défini, mais à travers cette démarche de consultation populaire, à travers ces réunions, nous pouvons réfléchir sur un outil clair qui peut aussi aider l'Union africaine à définir des politiques pour aider toutes les parties prenantes afin que notre Afrique puisse atteindre cette souveraineté alimentaire et nutritionnelle que nous voulons tant. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, madame, pour cette contribution importante sur le processus. Matheus?
Oh, sorry, Mamadou. We still have 2 interpreters speaking at the same time on the English channel. Guys, please, I'm asking you to coordinate with each other. Okay, over to you, Mamadou.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sefu, I don't know if you have something to say because it seems that everything has been said. I don't know if people are tired or it's so clear that they don't want to interact. It's an open space because in 1 minute we are supposed just to wrap up and then try to close the session on time. Sefu, any thought?
Thank you, Mamadou. I think I will come back during the closing remarks, or these are the remarks, so that maybe in case there are more people who would like to say something from what I've seen, they can say it and we can have reactions from what's been said as well.
Ok, merci beaucoup, c'est fou. Je pense que s'il n'y a pas d'autres interventions, nous allons donc clôturer la partie aussi sur l'interaction. Juste pour rappeler que nous avons d'abord dans un premier temps, après l'introduction et la contextualisation de cette table ronde, nous avons écouté à travers Allah le contenu et les enjeux qui sont derrière cette table ronde. Enjeux qui concernent des consultations pour entendre le plus de voix possible en Afrique sur des questions qui concernent tout ce qui est on est en train d'entendre comme discours autour de la COVID-19 et autour de la guerre Ukraine, qui a trouvé déjà qu'il y avait un certain nombre de débats importants sur le système alimentaire africain qui étaient en cours. Ça a été une opportunité pour certains de remettre en cause ce qui était la tendance globale, mais pour d'autres, d'essayer de renforcer leur position par rapport à ces rapports de force qui existent entre l'Afrique et d'autres continents. Donc l'enjeu, c'est de voir comment utiliser cette opportunité pour changer les paradigmes et changer les modes opératoires. Je pense que la contextualisation va dans ce sens et les nombreuses actions qui ont été menées en termes de processus pour arriver à ce stade ont été clairement définies par Allah. Ensuite, nous avons donc écouté cette déclaration qui a été faite avec différentes parties prenantes du mécanisme de la société civile et des peuples autochtones. En écoutant donc cette déclaration, on voit tout le travail de fond qui a été fait et la position qui a été toujours la position de la société civile de dire aujourd'hui qu'on est en train d'enfreindre aux règles, aux droits fondamentaux des peuples, particulièrement des peuples africains, à la souveraineté alimentaire, avec des crises qui ne font que créer encore de nouvelles solutions et des solutions qui ne sont pas des solutions adaptées au contexte. Donc, il montre aussi que l'espace comme le CFS, sont les CSA, disons en français, constituent des espaces où c'est les espaces qui existent aujourd'hui où nous pouvons démocratiquement aller discuter de ces questions de fond, de façon participative, mais aussi de façon responsabilisante. Donc, ils donnent la parole à différentes parties prenantes et qui mettent sur la table des débats de fond. Donc, aussi bien sur les mécanismes que sur le contenu de ce qui est lié aujourd'hui à ces crises que constitue la COVID-19 ou la crise, la guerre entre l'Ukraine et la Russie, et qui ont constitué des opportunités pour certains de remettre sur la table, à travers des mécanismes de spéculation, les difficultés liées au système alimentaire. Donc, nous avons ensuite ouvert la table ronde, qui a été l'opportunité, malheureusement qu'on n'a pas eu Mayaki avec nous, et qui a été non seulement Premier ministre dans son pays, le Niger, mais aussi qui a dirigé des structures stratégiques au niveau du SILS, mais aussi au niveau du NEPAD. Et donc, il aurait pu nous entretenir par rapport à ce qui se passe au niveau panafricain, mais nous avons eu l'immense plaisir d'écouter Mme Semedo de Cap-Vert, un pays africain considéré comme étant un pays insulaire dans le sens de sa taille et de son emplacement, et qui nous a entretenus par rapport à tout ce qu'elle a, tous les enjeux aujourd'hui de ces crises-là sur un pays comme le Cap-Vert. Donc, elle a montré qu'il y a des effets qui sont visibles aujourd'hui, mais qu'il y a suffisamment aussi des mesures qui sont prises au niveau institutionnel de l'État pour faire face à ces crises-là, non seulement à travers des données, mais aussi à travers des actions qui ont été entreprises. Et qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire pour qu'on puisse sortir de l'impasse. Ensuite, nous avons écouté Dr Mouari, donc il nous a entretenu par rapport au rôle et la place des municipalités dans la dynamique de la construction des systèmes alimentaires durables. Quel rôle ces municipalités peuvent jouer pour nous permettre d'avancer dans la structuration d'une dynamique des systèmes alimentaires dans une optique de durabilité, mais aussi de prise en charge par les communautés, les peuples eux-mêmes de leur avenir en lien avec les systèmes alimentaires. Nous avons écouté ensuite Ekaz Fujiwara, au nom du bureau régional de la FAO, d'exprimer les tendances actuelles qui existent au niveau global concernant l'Afrique. Certaines des données méritent d'être bien interrogées par la suite, mais il a donné une voix aussi de ce que peut faire la FAO, son institution, pour permettre à ce que cette déclaration puisse non seulement être valorisée, mais aider à ce que la participation effective et responsabilisante des communautés, des peuples africains, disons, puisse être une réalité dans ces espaces où il y a les États côtoient la société civile, le secteur privé et d'autres acteurs. Donc, je crois que dans l'ensemble, nous pensons que l'objectif étant d'abord de lancer officiellement cette dynamique liée à tout le processus de consultation à travers cette déclaration, mais aussi de permettre aux uns et aux autres de pouvoir s'exprimer pour nous permettre, disons, d'engager les réflexions avec les autres régions du monde qui seront aussi impliquées dans la production de connaissances pour permettre aux événements futurs de pouvoir être organisés autour des enjeux fondamentaux et d'avoir la voix de la société civile. Voilà donc un petit résumé de ce que nous avons pu faire cet après-midi à travers cette table ronde-là. Je donne la parole à Sefou. J'ai parlé un peu trop rapidement, je crois, juste parce que le temps presse. Je donne la parole à Sefou qui va dire un mot avant donc de transférer à Mathius et pour qu'on puisse arriver à la conclusion de ces travaux. Sefou, you have a floor. It seems that some people are not hearing what I've been saying. Is it, can you hear me? Did you hear me?
Yes, Mamadou.
So I can see that there are some hands. Sefou, Dr. Muhari wants to speak, I think, and Lavia Campesina, I don't believe Matthews of one of his colleagues.
All right, we can have Dr. Muhari.
Yeah, because she will give you a floor, Dr. Muhari. Yeah? Sefou will give you a floor.
Yes, I'm giving the floor.
Later on. Yeah.
I think I will not give my closing remarks because we have Dr. Muhari who will speak and Lavia Campesina. Mine is to just thank you for having your time to be part of this roundtable. To our panelists and to our participants, we are very grateful. And we have come out with solutions that we wanted to come out with. We've seen the relation between the local and the national government. We've seen what role organizations like the United Nations and the FAO can contribute towards food sovereignty, especially in African region, and how the African region can participate more in the global table when it comes to raising such issues, which was spoken here very well by Dr. Kaz, who came on. We've seen Mr. Muredi, who also spoke very well. We saw Ms. Semido as well in the beginning of the session, and she was able to speak about the issues of nutrition and also even the crisis that we are facing with women in relations to food sovereignty in the region of Africa. And we've been able to come out with a few resolutions. We are grateful to that. And because of time, I will rest there and I will invite Mr. Muredi to give his remarks, maybe in the next 3 minutes. Then we'll have Lavia Campesina, and then we will hand over to Mateus. Karibus, welcome, Muredi.
Yeah, please, we'll ask first Lavia Campesina. I don't know who is behind, if it's Mateus, to speak first, and then we give the last word to the three panelists. That was they were supposed to speak. So because Kaz also is raising his hand, and then we'll just give the floor to the panelists just to give a last word before we close. So we give the floor first to Lavia Campesina, who is behind.
It's Mateus here, Mamadou.
Okay.
Yes, before I'll just like to announce to everyone, but please don't leave the room yet. We still would like to hear the final words from Mr. Peter Muhari, Kaz, and our dear Mrs. Rosa Semedo. And after that, we'll have a small evaluation moment together, which I'm inviting you to take part of. Thank you. But now over to Mr. Peter Muhari and Kaz, and hopefully Ms. Rosa as well can give us her closing thoughts before the closing. Thank you.
Great. So Dr. Muhari, you have the floor.
Yes, I am happy to have participated in this forum. I only wanted to have maybe a short question, perhaps as a comment, just to ask whether there are certain learned lessons from food sovereignty in areas that are close to African context. That could be Latin America and Asia. Do we have already some lessons that we can draw from those other regions? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhari. So I will give the floor to Kaz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mamadou. Just wanted to share with you another information on agroecology, since you mentioned in your declaration. In 2018, FAO and the UN partners launched this scale-up agroecology initiatives. And a lot's going on in terms of study with a good evidence from Senegal or many countries, Kenya, others, which had economic, social, environmental benefits bring to farmers. But by the way, agroecology itself with the 10 elements of guidelines, but has been carried out by a number of African farmers and pastoralists for years and years. But now we are also accelerating that efforts. For example, in Western Africa, for supports work with ECOWAS and 8 countries to organize multi-stakeholder workshops to develop a program for agroecological transition in Western Africa, coupled with capacity development with a number of civil society producers organizations as well. So that I wanted to share with you some information. And once again, I really thank you for organizing this important workshop and inviting us and giving us this opportunity. I thank you.
Thanks very much, Kaz. So the last of our panelists representing government, the state will be the last one to speak. Just to give the last remark, please, Mrs. Maria Rosa Lopez Semedo, you have the floor for the last word for this roundtable.
Boa tarde. Bom, em nome do Governo de Cabo Verde, nós agradecemos imensamente pelo convite. Acho que nós tratamos aqui de um tema muito importante, sobretudo no nosso contexto, falar da questão da soberania alimentar num país tão vulnerável como Cabo Verde é muito complicado. Mas no contexto africano, acho que tem várias lições que a África pode seguir. Já foi falado na questão, sobretudo na questão América Latina, que tem várias lições, e outros países europeus. Mas a África há iniciativas em África que precisam ser mais divulgadas e também levadas a cabo por diferentes estados, porque os dados mostram que nós não estamos num caminho bom sobre a situação da insegurança alimentar, sobretudo a África subsaariana. É muito importante que os estados africanos pensam nas políticas mais inclusivas e também direcionar maior orçamento, um orçamento muito mais importante para a agricultura, pensar na questão da agroecologia e uma produção mais sustentável por forma alimentar do povo africano. Muito obrigada pelo convite.
Merci beaucoup, Madame, pour ces mots de conclusion. Donc, merci à tous les participants au nom du petit groupe de 2 personnes de la modération. Je vous remercie vraiment pour la patience, pour la contribution. Et donc, je crois que Seifou va dire le dernier mot à notre nom et passer la parole donc à Mathéus pour organiser la cérémonie de clôture. Et on va aussi se demander avant de terminer que chacun, tous ceux qui peuvent, de mettre les caméras pour qu'on puisse avoir une photo souvenir de ces échanges. Pour tous ceux qui pourront mettre les caméras pour la photo souvenir. Seifou?
Mamadou, I'm going to ask you for me to come in before Seifou, and she can have the word to close the session, if you'll allow. Just as a segue, I would love to share one other example of how the struggle for food sovereignty is moving forward in Africa, which is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and Other People Living in Rural Areas. This declaration, one of the rights in the articles in this declaration is, in fact, the right to the right of people on food sovereignty, their right to food sovereignty. So today, food sovereignty is a reality in international policy, the very concept of food sovereignty. And we are very proud to say that our African states were amongst the most voters in favor of this declaration. Paradoxically, as we know that geopolitics and economic and social development is complex, we see that many of our governments are taking some decisions that are not coherent with this position. But we see this declaration and other efforts as a sign that there's a will inside our governments to move into the right direction as well. So comrades and everyone here, once again, I'm also extending my thanks to you. I'm going to launch a poll for us to get a reading of the room, which I believe you can see in front of your screens now. You will see that there are 3 questions, okay? The first question is multiple choice. You can choose more than one if you would like. And make sure to interact, to scroll down, and you'll see question 2 and question 3 in front of you as well. We are inviting us to take 5 minutes to interact with this evaluation. And in a few moments, I will share the results with you. Please go ahead. We've had 4 people, 5 people respond so far. Please, we invite you warmly to interact with this evaluation. Can you let me know in the chat if you're having any problems? I will give another 1 minute for us to capture some more data, some more of your insights. Okay, time is up. Thank you very much. We got 15 answers out of 44 of you in the room, and I'm sharing with you right now the results of this chat. So 80% of you find that this session was pertinent. 60% of you found that it was informative. 53% of you found that it was interactive, and 47% of you found that this session was honest. And 27% of you still feel that there's still more space to be improved. Thank you for those comments. On the second question, how do you feel more hopeful about the transformation of our food systems? 53% of you feel very much more hopeful. 40% of you feel optimistic, and 7% of you don't feel more hopeful than before. And gladly, all of you are willing and interested in getting involved in this process, so on, as we move forward. That's it from me on this, Mamadou. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you for everyone's participation. I realized my camera was on the wrong place. It was a pleasure to be with you all. I want to take this last chance to thank all of the organizing team that was together building this. It was a long mission building this together. I'm very happy with the outcome. Thank you so much to our panelists. We hope that this roundtable will become a tradition for us in the African continent as we build these annual CSIPM consultations. Thank you very much to all of you once again, and over to Sefu to close us off and send us home happily. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias from La Via Campesina, and of course to everybody who has been a part of this consultation. To our panelists, we thank you very much, Mr. Muredi, for Kaz Fujirawa, for Ms. Semedo. Thank you very much for your participation. To my co-moderator, Mamadou, thank you very much. I want to thank our interpreters who did a very good job, and also to the CISPM coordination. So we will see you next time when we have a round table. And of course, for those who asked for the presentations, you could share your email addresses and we'll be able to send the presentations for today. So until next time, adios. I can see some messages from a few of the people who are saying thank you, congratulations. Thank you. Excellent roundtable. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Open your cameras. Open your cameras. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
You can open your camera so that we take a photo. Hi, Martin.